Alright battlers, welcome back to a brand new Go Battle League video. Snorlax makes my opponents quit the game. Let's get into it. Going into this first battle, you will notice that I did crop out the trainers' names. I know some people don't like it when people leave the match. They think maybe it's a little rude or unfair, but I just wanted to protect those trainers and not expose them on the channel. So you will see in this first game, I did lead Dialga. I have Kyogre and Snorlax, of course, on my team. I did win the lead there, so my opponent swapped into Snorlax. I'm going to go straight into Kyogre here. Definitely going to burn just one shield on Kyogre because Kyogre with an energy advantage can threaten a lot of things. A lot of trainers don't know if you're carrying Thunder or if you're carrying Blizzard, so you can really kind of scare the dragons. In comes Giratina, and speaking of Blizzard, I really did miss an opportunity there to go for it. I think my opponent probably would not have shielded. That probably would have been a one-hit KO or close to it, but either way, we're going to put on double surfs. Sometimes I like to double surf just because it forces your opponent to maybe expend a shield. Maybe they see their health chipping down really quickly and they feel like they should. So my opponent does KO me there with the Ominous Wind. I come in with Snorlax. So my opponent's going to realize just how hopeless the situation is. Shadow Ball does nothing and they immediately leave the game. So going to the next game, Dialga in the lead. I do want to talk about my movesets just briefly. Dialga with the standard set of Dragon Breath, Head and Draco Meteor. I do have Kyogre with Waterfall, Blizzard, and Surf. And then my Snorlax is actually rocking a really spicy moveset. I'll show you in just a second. We do win this lead situation against Kyogre here. In this lead, I do like to spend just one shield. I'm going to swap here into my Kyogre to absorb this Surf though. I knew it wasn't a Thunder because only I think 5 Waterfalls were fired off, but I am in a dangerous bit of territory here because my opponent could fire off a Thunder if they are carrying it. My opponent does let me KO their Kyogre, so that's a good sign for me. In comes Snorlax. I don't think the damage per energy is really worth it to go for Thunder or Blizzard against Snorlax. I prefer just spamming these surfs. So I'm going to fire up the first one here and draw that last shield, which is really nice. Shield's down. It's a really dangerous time to face my team here. I'm going to go for the surf here against Melmetal. So we've seen a ton of Melmetal in the Go Battle League, and I feel like a lot of people are leading Giratina in order to counter these Melmetals. I do swap into my Dialga here, and as you can tell by my team composition, I am really, really weak to fighting type attacks, specifically things like Melmetal and Machamp. So getting rid of Melmetal is one of my biggest priorities here. I'm going to shield up that Rock Slide expecting the superpower, but it's not. My opponent does come in here with their own Snorlax. I push for Draco Meteor, but we are not going to get their battlers, so I did pay for that. However, I do have a perfectly healthy Snorlax. Here we have Skull Bash and Outrage Snorlax. My opponent, realizing that the health advantage is just too great on my end, is going to leave that game as well. Going to game 3, we do have Garchomp versus Dialga. These Dragon Breaths are going to work Garchomp down so fast. My opponent does come in with Melmetal and perfectly lined up counters here. I do have my Kyogre. There are very, very few Melmetals running Thunderbolt in the Master League, so you really don't have to worry about it too much. Most are carrying that Rock Slide for the Togekiss coverage and then Superpower obviously to bust up the Steel types. So I am going to shield up this attack here, will be the Rock Slide. Because I did win the lead, I do want to push here to try to keep switch advantage. I don't want my opponent to be able to flip it back on me by winning this switched in matchup. Thus, I am going to spend my final shield here on Kyogre. I have noticed that the switch timer is up, so my opponent might be switching. In comes their Dialga, but I have energy loaded battlers. Here we go with the Draco Meteor. Really, really funny situation there. It's really funny that I was able to swap in and just capitalize on that moment. My opponent got really unlucky there, but it is what it is in the Go Battle League. Out comes Garchomp. Now, Garchomp hits really, really hard, so I have to be careful. This match is not over. This Outrage will demolish pretty much anything in its way. My opponent does Sand Tomb me there, and because it didn't KO and those Waterfalls are going to add up, they're forced to Sand Tomb again. Out of energy, in comes Snorlax, and my opponent is going to leave the game for the 3rd time in a row. Here we go with our Giratina, or excuse me, with our Dialga into Giratina. My opponent does swap into Machamp. I do have my Kyogre as an all-purpose safe swap. It does really well against most things that the rest of my team is weak to, so I feel very confident here. I recorded this video because as I was working on my Master League battles, I had a night where 5 people quit over the span of my 5 sets, and I just couldn't believe it. So I kept running this team. It was the same team, a matter of fact, and it was just such a satisfying feeling. It can be so hard to get the lead right in the Go Battle League. My opponent gets a boost here, and check this out, battlers. I am going to bring in the big bad Snorlax, and my opponent swaps out. When have you seen an opponent give up a boost? That is just the rarest thing. Like, when you get that Giratina boost, you want to stick with it. It's just so immensely powerful. My opponent's getting worked down really quickly by these Dragon Breaths, and pretty soon they're going to see the writing on the wall. I'm going to fire off another Iron Head here against this Metagross, but that Metagross is already deep into the red. My opponent is going to leave that game as well. So now that we have the I guess, levers out of the way, I'm going to talk about the strategy for this team. So I do have Dialga in the lead with my safe swap Kyogre and Snorlax in the back. So this Garchomp can hit Outrage really, really quickly with those Mud Shots. I'm going to shield up that first Sand Tomb and then put some shield pressure here with the Iron Head. I don't want to allow my opponent to get to the Outrage without at least taking a shield from them, but my opponent is going to get KO'd. Out comes their Dialga, and this team is actually not very good at handling Dialga either. My best Dialga counter is Dialga, so it can be really, really tricky sometimes, and you're going to see that a lot later on in this video. I do want to mention there that the Dragon Breaths, I've noticed, kind of lag. I'm going to swap here into my Snorlax to face off against Giratina, and my opponent has no. This is bad news bears. So I will say the Dragon Breaths do tend to lag. I noticed that if I'm in the lead situation with an opposing Dialga that has maybe a 40-50 CP or 40-25 or even as high as 40-90, I can get really, really chipped down really quickly by my opponent's attacks, and it just doesn't feel like a fair match. I mean, I have a best buddy 98% Dialga, and still sometimes I can just get eaten up by those Dragon Breaths much quicker than I prefer. So here is the Outrage. I like this moveset on Snorlax because my opponent never expects it. They expect one hard-hitting move and then one kind of maybe a nuke, but my Snorlax is a bit of both. So here we go with the Dialga mirror match. The best buddy boost definitely helps with the Dragon Breath lag, but it's still pretty prominent. I like to play this mirror a certain way where I want to get at least 2 Iron Heads off. I am going to try to shield at least once, but I really want to take both of my opponent's shields because my team can be so good when the shields are down. So I'm going to fire off a second Iron Head here, and as you can tell, that match really kind of got away from me in the lead. I don't understand exactly why the gap was that big, but in comes my Kyogre here, and expecting the Draco Meteor, I'm going to shield up, and it will be the Draco Meteor. So I do have my Kyogre with a ton of energy already loaded. I can Surf a Melmetal, or I can Blizzard whatever comes in. My opponent is going to think things over, comes in with their Giratina, and I'm actually going to go straight for Blizzard here. The shields are down, and Kyogre hits like a freaking bus. Look at that, super effective, and here comes Melmetal. So this is actually not a great situation for me because I spent all of my energy with Kyogre on that Giratina, and my Snorlax in the back is going to have to match up against a superpower Melmetal. So my only hope here is to not allow it to farm much more from my Kyogre, so I make the force swap. My opponent is going to definitely go for superpower here, which they do. Superpower does come with that debuff, so they are going to get weaker as it goes on. I just need to get to that Outrage before their third superpower, and we are just barely able to pull it off. So Battlers, I haven't made much Master League content. I don't feel extremely confident in the Master League. I think I'm getting a better handle on it now. The meta is extremely concentrated, and that really bums a lot of people out, but I will say this, with a very concentrated meta like that, it can be easier to learn. It is very resource intensive to get these Master League Pokemon ready, but once you know that there are probably 10, 15, maybe 20 moving pieces in the whole Master League meta, I think it can be easier to kind of wrap your head around it. So we do shield up that Blizzard, sacrificing the shield to win the lead. In comes their Dialga. Maybe an opportunity to go for the Iron Head here, but my opponent is going to definitely use their shield there. I'm going to swap here into Kyogre, my safe swap, and I know my opponent has a ton of energy. This could possibly be Draco Meteor, so I do shield, and it is. A lot of the Dialga matchups are just calling the Draco Meteor right. So my opponent does come in with their Giratina here. My shield is down, so I know I'm going to eat a Shadow Ball here, but I do get to the Blizzard. Let's see if this Giratina shields the Blizzard. It does not. Another Giratina falls to that Kyogre Blizzard. I'm telling you, trainers, with Kyogre's Blizzard coverage and then with Snorlax with Outrage and Lick, it just offers so much coverage against the dragons here. I know my opponent is going to have a Draco Meteor. The only question is, can Snorlax survive it? And here we're going to showcase Snorlax's insane bulk. Look at that. Not even 100% health. Here it comes. Boom! Snorlax is still hanging around. We lick down Dialga to win the match. So A lot of fun games here. I am working up on my battler rating. I know it's not quite as high as some of these other awesome battlers, but still trying to wrap my head around the Master League, and I wanted to make at least one video. I'm just so sorry that it came so late. So here comes Kyogre with the Surf. I'm going to fire off a few Dragon Breaths here, and then I work up to the Draco Meteor, but I'm going to fire off the Iron Head just to kind of put that Draco threat in their mind, and they do give me that first shield. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to spend at least one shield on this lead scenario matchup because I know I can just Dragon Breath down at this point, which we do. My opponent has one more shield, so they can either shield this Draco Meteor or they can eat it. Let's see what they decide to do. And they do decide to shield it. It is Dialga though, which does pose some problems for me here. This video does have some losses. I know I've shown a lot of wins so far, but I do definitely get into those losses because this team is not perfect. A lot of these Master League teams are really, they do have holes in them. You try to cover as much as you possibly can with every team, but it can get really tough. So I go here for the Blizzard. My opponent, realizing the Iron Head would not be enough to KO. In comes Snorlax. So this is another reason why I really love this moveset on my Snorlax. It does give you some advantages, although some days I do wish I had Body Slam. I'm going to try to work up here to the Skull Bash. My opponent is going to spam these Body Slams as quickly as possible. So it's kind of a race. How many Body Slams can they fire off and how quickly can I buff my defense? I did lose, I think, a CMP tie there. My opponent might have been 1 or 2 licks early, but that was unfortunate because I wish I could have gotten the defense boost before that Body Slam landed. So in the Snorlax mirror match, I do think it's advantageous to go for the Body Slams because the Earthquake is not going to be super effective. Outrage, if you have it, can do a little bit more damage, but it's not on a damage per energy basis really that helpful. We're able to actually outrage down that Snorlax. So very GG's. Going into this matchup, Dialga in the lead again against Giratina. Again, people are leading Giratina because they are scared to death of Melmetal, just like I am. I actually don't have a Master League Melmetal built. I do have one that is 15, 14, 14 IVs, so it will win the mirror match against, or it will win the CMP tie in any kind of mirror match against a Melmetal with less than 15 attack, but I really want that perfect one just to be certain. So again, the Dragon Breaths are kind of questionable to me in the Master League. As you can tell there, I'm deep into the red. My opponent is still in the yellow, and they just barely hit the red right before I was KO'd. So I do expect Draco Meteor here, my opponent knowing that they are going to faint very soon. It is Draco Meteor, and again, just like we saw in previous matches, Kyogre does have a lot of energy here. Out comes the Giratina. I'm actually going to make this swap into Snorlax to catch this energy. I do want to hold some energy on my Kyogre because if a Melmetal or something is in the back, I know I can handle it. Out comes this Rhyperior, so I'm actually going to go straight for Outrage here, fearing that the Rock Wrecker would KO my Snorlax before I was able to get any damage off at all. My opponent does get to a charge move here, and this one will be Rock Wrecker. Good deal, though, because I do have my Kyogre. Going to fire off a few more Surfs here, and my opponent is not able to get to another Rock Wrecker, which is really great. We're going to tie this matchup with a bow with our Blizzard. Going to this next game, Dialga into Kyogre. As we talked about before, spend one shield, Dragon Breath down, straight Iron Heads. We know how this matchup goes. Gonna fire off a Iron Head here to try to put some shield pressure on this Kyogre. Does take that first shield, which is really nice. I'm actually going to swap out into my own Kyogre, and this is probably a mistake because now I'm forced to shield this Kyogre in case my opponent has Thunder. They do bluff there and fire off the Surf, which is really, really clever. If they are packing Thunder, it's a really, really clever bluff. My opponent is going to get to another charge move. I know this is Surf, so I'm actually not going to shield. In comes my opponent's Snorlax, and this is actually not a terrible situation. I'm expecting the Body Slam here because it was so fast, and it will be Body Slam. Kyogre can really duke it out with almost anything else in the Master League meta in most cases. I mean, you aren't going to see a lot of grass or a lot of electric, so it is probably the safest pick in the meta. Switch timer's up, so I'm going to swap here into my Dialga. I try to Dragon Breath down, but it doesn't work out. Expecting Superpower there. I do shield, but it's Earthquake, so actually, either way, that was definitely a good call. Going to go ahead and fire off my Iron Head here against this Kyogre to bring it down. Out comes my opponent's Machamp, and this is actually not good for me at all. I'm going to fire off the Iron Head here to try to draw that last shield. But here you're going to see my Snorlax's moveset really a hindrance to my ability to counter my opponent because I'm actually not able to get to moves very quickly. If I were to carry Body Slam on this Snorlax, it would do really well. I'd actually just be able to Body Slam down that Machamp. I do Sacrificial Swap my Kyogre here, which is really, really nice, forcing my opponent to spend a little bit of their energy. In comes my Snorlax. Battlers, if we win this game, I need you to leave me a like. It would mean so much to me. Here comes the cross chop, a few more licks, and we lick down Machamp. Very, very close game. Going to this matchup, Dialga into Giratina again. My opponent does swap into Togekiss, and I do want to mention this as well. Kyogre makes for a wonderful Togekiss counter. It's not going to take super effective from the Ancient Power or the Flamethrower or the Aerial Ace, so it's really, really safe. And these Waterfalls are actually really on par with these Charms. I'm not sure they do exactly as much damage, because I know Kyogre does have a larger health pool than that Togekiss does, but it feels pretty even in most of these matchups. So out comes that Giratina again. I'm going to go straight for my Surf, and because I was able to win that switched in matchup, I'm actually really comfortable here bringing out my Snorlax. This is going to force my opponent to swap, and then I have Dialga lined up with my opponent's Rhyperior. So not a great situation in truth be told. I'm going to force that first shield with the Iron Head, trying to get to another Iron Head here, but we are not able to do it. That Mud Slap lands, KOs us, not a good situation at all. I realize here that my opponent's Rock Wrecker would hurt. They actually bait me with the Surf, which is really, really clever. And then my opponent's Giratina in the back is not going to do much against my Snorlax, but I'm at such a huge health disadvantage, it's going to be really, really close. In comes my opponent's Giratina, and they're going to fire up a charge move. This is actually a huge misplay by my opponent. If they would have gone double Shadow Ball, I think they would have had a good chance, but they actually go double Ominous Wind, and it is really, really easy for me to just work up to the Outrage, and we steal this game. 2 more battles to go, trainers. If you like this, please leave me a like, comment down below what you thought, and then subscribe to see more. So we do see Dialga into Rhyperior. Gotta get out of there. In comes my Kyogre into my opponent's Dialga. So again, a very dicey situation here. I'm actually going to push for Blizzard here. My opponent does get to a charge move. My fingers across its Iron Head, but it's actually Draco Meteor. So we got denied all of that energy, and we were not able to force my opponent's shield. Gonna bring in my Dialga here, hoping to work up a lot of energy and then double Iron Head Rhyperior and just pray that my Snorlax can handle whatever's in the back. So my opponent does fire up another Draco Meteor. Their attack was double debuff, so my Dialga comes out of that matchup with a lot of health. Gonna fire this off against Rhyperior and then get to another one, which is really good. The only question is, can Snorlax seal the deal with whatever is in the back? Gonna bring in Snorlax right away. My opponent does go for a charge move. This will be Rock Wrecker, which would take a huge chunk out of Snorlax. It's such an overpowered move. We're actually able to beat them to their second Rock Wrecker, which is really good. We are on a roll. Going to take down that Rhyperior. Out comes Metagross. So Metagross's Meteor Mash is going to do an enormous amount of damage. Actually pushing there for the Outrage because I wanted to chip down Metagross as much as I could. Meteor Mash is going to almost take out Snorlax, but we survive. Firing off our Outrage. Can Dialga pull it off though? Firing off the Dragon Breaths, here comes another Meteor Mash, and we cannot pull this one out. Snorlax is really weak, so the Bullet Punches are going to KO it. Going to the last game of the video, trainers, this is what happens when you run into a fighting type lead. So here is Machamp, and Dialga actually with its Dragon Breaths can work down this Machamp pretty quickly, but it's a very costly matchup. I do swap into Kyogre, and out comes my opponent's Dialga. So they are really countering me perfectly here, trying to push for that Blizzard. I'm actually going to keep my fingers crossed again, and it's just the Iron Head this time, so we are able to get to the Blizzard. Will my opponent shield the Blizzard? They do not. Dialga goes down, and we still have a fighting chance. Out comes Machamp, no pun intended. Gonna bring in my Dialga here because the Dragon Breaths were gonna do serious work. Actually gonna go ahead and shield up that first cross chop, and it will be doom for me if my opponent has a Melmetal in the back. Actually gonna go for a second Iron Head here to put more pressure on the Machamp. We take it down. My opponent still has 2 shields. Out comes their own Snorlax, and this is actually not good. If I had Body Slam, maybe there's a fighting chance here, but I just have Skull Bash and Outrage, so this is going to be a really uphill battle. I guess I could have double baited with Outrage and maybe found a way to, no, I just think it's a mile too far. This matchup is pretty much a done deal, although we are going to make it really tough for my opponent. Here I am actually trying to play with the Switch Clock and see if I can bring in Dialga to do a little bit more damage with the Dragon Breath and see maybe if that helps kind of flip this matchup, but it looks really, really tough. Firing off another Skull Bash here, my opponent does decide to shield, so spending both of their shields, definitely smart, not being too cocky. I'm going to absorb that Body Slam, try to push for another Skull Bash. I think this is probably my only win condition at this point. I might be wrong. Let me know in the comments down below. But I do fire off another Skull Bash here, trying to work down the Snorlax and then going to absorb this energy, try to bring in my Dialga to Dragon Breath down, but this Snorlax is going to be really close. Now, they're actually able to lick me down. So, battlers, thank you so much for watching until the end. I really, really appreciate you. More Go Battle League content, more Silph Arena content coming very, very soon, so stay tuned.